It's a lighter week in the new releases because everybody cleared a
Nothing's
path
off.
for Black Panther. I mean, Wakanda Forever, obviously the huge film at the box office this weekend, absolutely dominating the second largest opening of 2022 so far, although did not beat out the other big Marvel release of the year, the Multiverse of Madness, although kind of funny in
That's
retrospect.
different.
It's a little funny in retrospect, looking back on all the hype they built up for Multiverse of Madness and like, what did that movie actually really do in the greater MCU?
I think it established some things that when you watch this new one, it makes you go like, "Oh my gosh, someone's gone." Except that movie from 2 movies ago said that we could bring anybody, and then the last movie
Yeah.
when they're in Asgard said that they might be able to bring anybody. But
Yeah.
I think it opens up little things here and there, like a lot of the after credits do, where they might be able to go back and take a different route if they wanted to. But I think the difference between this one and Multiverse of Madness is that Multiverse had a lot of hype in terms of it. When you compare the fake cameos, I think this has become a new ritual when
Yeah.
it comes to Marvel. Marvel or Multiverse of Madness kept saying, I don't know, maybe Iron Man? And they would just play coy about it. This
Yeah.
new one would play coy about Doctor Doom. So it's like they all have that one thing to attract people. But I think in terms of cameos, that's where Multiverse of Madness had people coming back over and over and over again because
That's
you
the
didn't get
thing.
an HD clip of that scene until it dropped on Disney Plus. So
Yeah. All the fan speculation and hype around Multiverse of Madness is like, who could show up? Anybody could show up. We all have to be there opening weekend so we don't get spoiled. And with this one, I think there's less of that sort of suspense. You know, they've kind of downplayed the like, oh, well, who's the next Black Panther gonna be? And really focused on the more like somber kind of reckoning with this collective loss. And I don't know if like the idea of going to the movie theater to grieve is necessarily like as strong of a motivator as like maybe we're gonna see the new X-Men castings in this movie, but it's not like a bad number whatsoever.
nah, it's just-
$180 million.
It is not bad at all, especially for a movie where we were just talking about people going into a film excited to see somebody. I mean, the lead that people were excited in the first one isn't in this one, so you're right. I was telling Alina afterwards, I'm like, we're going to get to a point, right, where we go into these movies going, what, there's no casualties? What, no one's dying? Oh, a whole war? Are you ready to go for like whatever the third end game is 10 years from now? I'm going like, I don't want to leave the house. I don't want to go pay $15 to go see my heroes die. Like, it's going to get to that point
Yeah.
where
I mean,
where
by
I feel
then
like we're
it'll
going to
be-
begging for it to be cliche.
Yeah, and by then we'll be paying $25 for movie tickets. But
I did that in my head. I was like, I can't believe I said 15. I don't know what discount Tuesdays I'm going on. Still having hope. But yeah, I mean, overall, I think it had a pretty decent reception over the weekend with Black Panther making good box office. Just the word of mouth of it and people having different discussions from it. And as we discussed, because we have a whole spoiler one after credits up on Intercut, just looking at that poster, seeing how well the script and the way that they were able to approach it with all of the changes because of Chadwick's passing, to still be able to take what was originally that element of Chadwick facing Namor and then having to substitute that with what would be his sister's journey against Namor. And just this poster beautifully puts it. The whole movie, especially rewatching it again, you just see how they parallel in every way, shape, or form. From Wakandans always coming from the top. Obviously, you got the Noches group always coming from the bottom. You got the fire versus the water. Just a bunch of the parallels with how they ascend the throne. And then a bunch of other spoilers that I don't want to get to. But I think they do a really beautiful job with it. And I think it merits a lot of good stuff for the characters on rewatches. Whether people think it's better than the first, I mean, that's up for people to decide. But after having a week to sit on it and a couple rewatches, I think it's a very solid entry.
yeah, I mean, I think it's a solid film for sure. I'm definitely not putting it in the same class as the first Black Panther, which I feel like is just a little bit more cohesive and doesn't have as many of the like shoehorned in plot elements as this one does. I do wonder, and I'm not saying this having a firm answer. I'm genuinely asking you, are we grading Black Panther Wakanda Forever on a curve? Because this is perhaps one of the most cursed movies in production, or that was in production, because like it's so unfathomable to have lost somebody as immense as Chadwick, and not just immense, but immense to this property. Like, are we just giving it a little bit of a pass because of all that, or is it genuinely working, I think, in the long term?
I mean, can you name me other movies where we've lost somebody? I think of Heath Ledger when he passed, right? And what that added to the Joker. And you could argue, are we adding more to the Joker's performance? I think enough time has passed where I don't think that's the case. But at that moment, definitely it hyped it up. What was his role, though, that he was in where other people came in, the Dr. Parnassus one? I don't think that added anything to that movie. I think the movie still needs to have an element of it being good. Will people add extra stuff to it? For sure, but I think this may be a movie where it warrants it. I think this is a movie where, introspectively, they were able to kind of showcase their grief up on screen. It is still a Marvel product. I've heard this discussion of, like, can a Marvel product properly show grief up on screen? Can it get there? And then halfway through, you see a cameo appearance from someone in order to push a show, and that kind of cuts it out? Maybe. But I still think that there's a merit of it that's good. And I don't think it's bad to take into account the turmoils that happened in its production, because that's technically what the movie's about.
Yeah. I mean, it is so closely linked to what happened. Like, it's making the outside world context the text of the movie in a way. Yeah. And so you can't just sort of like ignore that half of it. I mean,
the first, you know, like what you're saying right now is don't take into account the context leading into this one. Well, then don't take into account the context leading into the first Black Panther, which is kind of the whole point of the first Black Panther and what it's supposed to represent. So I'm a person who thinks context matters, always. Yeah,
you can't really remove a movie from the cultural moment it comes in, right? Like, movies are elevated, or sometimes they're made worse by when they are released and how we all feel about things when they're released. So, yeah, I mean, it's certainly, like, I think a lot of people, myself included, had our hopes up for this film, I should say, and we're rooting for its success. But I don't think we are deluding ourselves into giving it a favorable review just because we want it to be good. I think it's genuinely good. I think there's a lot of genuinely interesting stuff there, and we've talked more at length in our after credits with spoilers, talking about the types of thematic elements that Ryan Coogler's so good at bringing into these stories. And there's just there's a lot of stuff to really take away from this film that I think works. So, you know, as much as I want to second guess myself, I do think I ultimately think this is, you know, one of the better Marvel films, and certainly one of the best ones we've gotten in a little while. Gustav in the live stream comments asked, do you think they will do a movie giving a deeper look into Tenochtitlan's character, Namor? We did talk about it briefly in our Black Panther Wakanda Forever after credits, but I think you were saying, you know, maybe we'll see him in another movie, maybe we'll see him in a Disney Plus show. Do you have any strong feelings one way or another?
I'm only going to say movie because of the water effects, and I don't want him to go cheap on the water effects. I want him to take whatever the boy's doing over there for his December Avatar movie and apply all of those great effects to the sequel. And I think I'd rather that money definitely be invested into a movie rather than a series. But we'll see, because another worry was I feel that the whole Wakandan storyline and everybody from there works better as a group. I feel that that's what this movie exemplifies, and that's the whole point of the phrase Wakanda Forever. And you were mentioning the Namor's people have the same thing, but theirs is the Talokan Rise. So they both have very similar lines, and I don't know, I think splitting them into a series or individualizing them isn't the smartest thing. But I did want to give props to something, because we had just talked about another superhero movie last week, and you mentioned how you felt that Black Adam was showcasing way too many characters that, while they may be the originals in the comics, like in the zeitgeist, we just got movies where we've seen characters like this. So Zach, I'm going to ask you, for a world where we have so many underwater superheroes, and knowing good and well that we're about to get another Aquaman around the corner, knowing that Namor's original comic book origins came before Aquaman, did you go into this movie at any point having that same kind of reservations that you had for Black Adam, or did you not even realize it and go, wow, this feels like an original character? I completely forgot about all the other underwater people.
Well, no, I mean, you know what? When they do actually go and visit the underwater, the Talokan, I did think like, oh, this kind of feels like Aquaman, right? And maybe the wonder that I'm supposed to feel at that moment, the wonder that I know some other people who like the film more than me felt, maybe I would have felt a little more of that wonder, A, had I not seen a film like Aquaman beforehand, or B, had I not seen the trailer for Avatar 2, The Way of the Water beforehand, and seen how much better the CGI looks in that film. Yeah, I mean, I think there is something about when a thing isn't a novel to you on screen, whether or not it came first in the comic books. That's just context that I don't have. But I have context of what I've seen on the big screen, and the water stuff, I guess, just wasn't as impressive as maybe it could have been, wasn't as transportive as maybe you want it to be, because we've seen maybe other attempts at it or better versions of it, not too, somewhat recently, I should say.
Yeah, I agree. But as his character, did you feel like, oh, this is yet again another Fishman, or did it feel like, oh, this is a different, unique individual that has been added and I want to see more of him?
Right. I would say I felt like it's more unique. Again, this is going back to what we were talking about with Coogler, injecting it with so much more of a thematic resonance and imbuing all of this Mayan myth into the story, into the character design, and drawing those parallels between the Talokan and the Wakandans. I think all of that separated Namor from maybe somebody like Aquaman, at least for me. And also, Tenoch got ripped, but he's not exactly Jason Momoa in the part.
That too, which is exactly why I appreciate that. So I'm very curious to see what he's going to do. They mentioned that Tenoch is writing a book, because in approaching this and talking about the different culture dynamics, Ryan Coogler's like, I didn't realize he was writing a book on this. So he's like very well versed in this idea of, communication and, just the culture clashes. So I'm very curious to see where they expand on him. I hope they do the Civil War thing. Civil War is one of my favorite movies because one of the best side characters and their introduction was Black Panther. So I can only imagine, the gift that is to be the cameo or the supporting character here, and then being able to take it on your own. So we'll see where it goes.